Well, thank you very much for that, Bridget. I hope I don't mismanage any expectations. This panel is around digital skills and the gap that we talked about this morning. But more importantly, it's about how do we make sure that the UK is a world-leading digital economy, and specifically one that works for everyone. We absolutely must make sure that people have the skills they need to live and to work. And in an increasingly digital future, we have to work much harder at adoption and basic skills. Data released by the government has showed that the digital sector is growing at 7 times the rate of the rest of the economy. And with that growth comes the need for new skills and new talent. And yet, over the past 15 years, the UK has lost 2 million places in publicly funded further education for adults. 2 million. And over the past 5 years, we've seen a 56% reduction in part-time students in higher education, and overwhelmingly mature students. So this comes at a time, though, where technologies like artificial intelligence and robotics are transforming the way that we work and live. And the government has given us an estimate that around 7.5% of all jobs, that's about 1.5 million jobs, in England could be automated or partly automated in the coming years. So that really speaks to the urgent need required for an upskilling of the current workforce. Whatever the scale of disruption, retraining will be lifelong, and it will be necessary for many of us. The Auger review, which I sat on, has made some recommendations on further education, but we have had quite a lot of change and shift in government, so we haven't seen any impact from that yet. But I am hoping that there will be some kind of emphasis on bootstrapping the FE sector, which is a lot more, shall we say, underfunded and not as organised in terms of connectivity and voice that the HE sector has. But, you know, despite recent negativity that suggests automation and new technologies will lead to the widespread destruction of jobs, at Tech UK, we have also talked to tech parents and their view of education and the future of work, which shows that they are optimistic about the future of work and what that will mean for children currently at school. 64% were optimistic about future job opportunities that their children would have access to, and that's exciting. But what's interesting about that is that we have to influence children much younger than we are influencing them in the education system today. I don't know about you, but when I look around at how children are influenced into certain things, you know, very simple things like you walk into a clothes shop for kids and the blue t-shirt says genius and the girl t-shirt says make the world a prettier place. You know, that influence starts pretty young, and we are stereotyping extremely efficiently and in the wrong way, I feel. So of those parents that we talk to, though, in our study at Tech UK, 90% believe that their children would need to retrain throughout their lives to keep up with the pace of technological change. And I read the Israeli historian Yuval Noah Harari. In his book, he says, it's not the robots that we should worry about, but it's whether we are able to retrain and reskill ourselves every 5 years or less that matters more. And I think that's quite interesting, that there is a personal commitment to lifelong learning and not just that someone tells you to do it. So there's that. I guess the cavalry's not coming on lifelong learning unless you put a personal commitment in there. So we need a greater focus on relevant education. We do have a gaping hole in the kinds of skills that our industry needs and what we're churning out in the education system. And this is why we, the IoC, have got together academia and industry specifically to make sure that we've got courses that are relevant for learners who want to either stay or retrain into the technology industry. And it is exciting to see that we've got a lot of success out of those training courses, with 32,000 learners already online through the IoC. So we do need a more balanced approach in the curriculum, one that supports knowledge-based learning, but also nurture the skills such as critical thinking and teamwork. After all, a software engineer in my world is probably just a problem solver. So we need to perhaps not wall ourselves up behind acronyms and fancy wording, but just be people who can sort stuff out. And that's what we do in tech all the time. So policymakers also need to be radical in their approach to adult education and work with us in industry to ensure that workforces are encouraged and supported to retrain and to upskill quickly. As the world of work changes, employers supported by government have a crucial role to play in providing opportunities that help people learn throughout their careers. And we are seeing this through the apprenticeship levy as we see that expanding. So I would like to take you on a journey through what our esteemed panel can help us solve the skills gap. You know, what do we need to do? What are the practical things that we can do to make this happen at speed? How can we be better and create competitive advantage for the UK versus other countries who've got their act together potentially better than we have? And what can we do to make sure that we are a digital nation of significance that thrives in a post-Brexit economy? So with that, I'm going to ask my panel to introduce themselves. Welcome.
Thank you.
So, Liz, shall we start with you?
Yeah, I feel sorry for anyone that's already listened to me talking for an hour earlier. Hi, I'm Liz Williams. I'm recently appointed as CEO of a new organisation called Future.Now, which is a consortium from industry, government and third sector, looking at how do we encourage people to be able to thrive in this digital world. I've been part of the digital infrastructure, I suppose, the last 10 years. It's something that really matters to me. And somebody said to me the other day, why have you gone to do that job there? And I said, well, there comes a point where you either have to lean in or you have to shut up. And I decided I needed to lean in. So we'll talk more, I'm sure, but that's me.
Thank you.
My name is Manish. Glad to be here today, and thank you to all the panel members and the delegates in the room. So I represent Infosys and I run the public services for Infosys as a business. But beyond my primary role of running a P&L, I am deeply passionate about this digital learning in which I got, I would say, dragged in, not involved, way earlier in 2014 when we were trying to relook at how do we close the skill gap. How do we stay relevant to our clients? And running an organization that is spread across 70 countries, 240,000 people, it is no easy and a mean task in a world of digital, in a world of agile, when everything has to be delivered tomorrow. You can't have training programs that actually run weeks or months, and with people fully engaged onto them. So there has to be a new way of thinking, reimagining the future workforce. And that's where I got involved. So I'm deeply passionate about this. And I thank you everyone for inviting me here. And I'll be sharing some of those thoughts as we go along the session.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Julie Elliot. I'm the Labour Member of Parliament for Sunderland Central in the northeast of England. And I've been the MP for the last 10 years. Before that, for many years, I was a trade union official working in the public and the private sector. So the issues around skills and reskilling has been, the best part of my working life for the last 20 odd years in different ways. I chair the all-party group on digital skills, which we launched not long before the last election. We managed to have 2 meetings and the election happened and everything stopped again, but we've started up again. And I've also been on the DCMS Select Committee for the last 4.5 years, where we've spent a lot more time on digital stuff, particularly around the fake news agenda, than any of the other bits of the committee's work. So I've got quite a broad background in this area. Reskilling and upskilling are hugely important, whether we're talking about digital skills or other skills in the economy, because the days of people leaving school and staying doing the same thing till they retire have just gone. Doesn't matter whether you're an engineer, a teacher, or working in the digital environment. And certainly the area I represent has gone through in my lifetime 2 or 3 iterations of the whole economy changing from being the most productive shipbuilding area in the country, and that we had coal mines, they all went, and then we've got the largest and most productive car plant in the country now in Sunderland. That, you know, as the car industry declines in the country, we also became the digital catapult when we had the Regional Development Agency in Sunderland. So particularly at the university level, we have a huge offering both in Sunderland and across the region in this area. Where I think we lack, as does the whole country, is in schools, where I don't think the curriculum has perhaps kept pace with what employers and what the job market wants. The one thing that is certain in the world is that change is a constant. It's constant in the workplace, and as we leave the EU and the challenges and opportunities that creates, we need to be as well prepared to carry on developing as a country and make sure that the people in this country have the skills that they need to get the jobs that are out there. I do think there's a variety of solutions to the problem. I think curriculum in schools really needs to be looked at, and actually the curriculum for teacher training, because some of the things that we talked about at the last all-party group was the fact that teachers actually don't have the skills themselves in order to teach our young people what they need to know. So we need to really go back and look at this very carefully. I'm a great supporter in digital skills apprenticeships. I think apprenticeships are hugely important. Not only does it mean young people don't end up with massive debt, but they also have a much more practically focused skill base than an academic skill base. There is obviously the university route, but in general we have to look across the range, not at just our young people coming through, but lifelong learning, as you spoke about, is hugely important. It always has been hugely important, and it's one of the things I'm particularly interested in, that the government need to get right, the support that needs to be put in place for people who need to update and retrain their skills to keep us at the forefront of the digital economy across the world.
I'm curious, going off piste here a little bit, trade unions and automation. Is that I'm allowed to ask about that?
Yeah.
I mean, my impression, and I could be completely wrong about that, but trade unions hate anything, sweeping generalisation I know, that implies automation, loss of jobs, progress, potentially. So how do you reconcile the, being on your role as, the digital skills all-party parliamentary group? How do you reconcile that with a whole career experience in trade union behaviour with getting to grips with the new digital future? I mean, it's so interesting, isn't it?
Well, I would totally disagree with your view of the way trade unions work in the modern world. That isn't my experience of trade unions. If you look at...
That's what the media headlines
have
you put. Right.
And it probably was true when I was a child.
Right.
I'm 56. It's never been my experience. I've been active in the trade union movement for the last 30 years and started to work for a trade union in the 90s.
Yeah.
And it absolutely is not my experience. If companies have trade union recognition and they work with their trade union, they develop the workforce and the skills, and it's about upskilling their workforce and adapting to change. And actually, some of the best lifelong learning was in trade union learning that was funded by the last Labour government. So I think the perception you've got is entirely not where the real world is. Because actually, a trade union and an employer both want the same thing. They want the company to do well, but they want their workforce to benefit from the company doing well. So if they work together on it, they're not in conflict at all.
I'm heartened to hear it saying. So back to the agenda then, back in the room.
Not like me going off piece.
No. So we talked about building a digital nation of significance. Why is it important to create a talent pipeline for an organisation through upskilling, retraining and reskilling, Manish?
So for us, having a talent pipeline is at the epicenter of our business, because what we do for the organizations world over is work with them on the technology transformation program, business transformation program. If you look at some of the data, before the digital disruption started to manifest itself, somewhere earlier of last decade, the skills that you actually learned were relevant for 5 years. So at that point in time, I think we were about 160, 170,000 people. And when we used to track the graph based on the demand from the customers, we were okay for 5 years. And I know you made a comment about that. Today, there's the lifetime of technology relevance. The skill relevance is 18 months.
18 months.
18 months is what we are tracking internally.
Does that mean you have to retrain every 18 months on each
absolutely.
of your 170,000 people?
Absolutely, and that's the biggest challenge, for which we had this journey, a massively long journey.
And how do you do that? What happens?
So, we started in 2014, and I would not go into the details of what happened between 2014 and 17, because we tried a lot of different approaches. We tried different platforms, because the whole idea was you have 200,000 odd people spread across 70 locations, of which more than 133,000 people are what we called as GLOMO, the global mobile workforce. So they can be in a country one day and move to another country and so on and so forth. It's a consulting and a technology services organization. So how do you actually have set a training program to do that? We tried multiple options. So initially, we ran out, and tried to look at what the ecosystem or the industry is to offer, and we tried to use some of those best practices. Nothing worked. The uptake was very low, and we were not able to get over the fence. We never used to even have even a bare minimum quorum attending those programs. So there was a lot of learning, relearning ourselves of how do we educate this workforce. And the penny drop movement was the micro-learning, saying that until and unless we are actually able to offer training.
So can you just explain to the audience what micro-learning is?
Yeah. So micro-learning is, letting people learn at their own pace, in their own time, in their own space, and making it fun, making it relevant, but making it very progressive in their end goal or in their career. So that's micro-learning. And if you look at the way people learn today, so we actually came out with this platform called Lex, which is called as Wingspan externally. But if you look at Lex, it is exactly like Netflix. So when you actually open Lex, the first thing you see is the most relevant thing is actually coming out as featured to you. And then, all the courses that you're doing in multiple bite size, they are coming in small droplets. Then you have, okay, your peers are doing this. And then there's a machine learning algorithm.
So it tells you what your peers are learning.
Yeah, it tells, so there's a cohort. Yeah,
to start binge, do you like binge train?
Yes. And
Whole weekend of it.
And there's a navigator which actually helps. So, you know, we, in the analysis, we figured out there are 3 types of learners. One who comes to the platform and knows exactly what they need, and they know what they want to learn, you know, from where, which are the sources they want to learn, and you know, how they want to learn it and what's the end goal. There are second type of learners. They know what they want to learn, but they don't know the path to the end goal. And there are third type of learners who know that they need to learn, let's say a topic, let's say machine learning, but where to start, what to do, they don't know how to actually go through the entire bit. So the navigator is designed as a mind map. It actually is a mind map of a person, and it actually looks at you know, how the person is and you know, what they have done, and then, you know, based on it, it keeps giving in a droplets of what should be the career path to the end goal, or what should be the learning path rather to the end goal.
And it's designed to be short and sharp as an intervention.
Absolutely. So I would not say it is a complete course. It is a primer.
Yeah.
So like in learning, as I say to my team as well, there are always 3 steps. One is learn, second is apply, and third is assess. So it is that learning part, the priming part of getting to know the theory, getting to know the basics, getting to know how it works.
They apply it as they work on projects.
They apply it there, or we have within Lex we have something called as the playground, where they have the environments completely set up for them to actually go and practice those skills, and it's gamified, so that you know, when they are actually trying to you know, do some Python programming, they are able to see what their peers are doing, and they are able to collaborate.
I'm just curious, does that work for everybody? Because that sounds like my kids would really love that. You know, like the younger generation, which I imagine you've got quite a lot of in your...
Yes, yes.
So it's aimed at them, isn't it?
I think I would hate it.
I'm just wondering.
It's actually aimed at every single person in the organization. For example, I end up spending a lot of time on Lex to keep myself relevant in the conversations that I'm doing, because there are drip sites feed as well. So if I'm going to a meeting on a specific topic, and if I don't know, because Lex is not, we are not trying to become the Coursera's of the world. The idea is micro-learning, and learning can come from everywhere.
And you're using a lot of water references. You use like droplet and drip feeds. So is that real words, or are you making that up?
No, these are real words.
No, real word. Okay.
But I suppose the thing that, as you were talking there, one thing, when you were talking about the 3 different types of people, they're all going there to learn, to start with. And I suppose, you know, one of the things I'm really interested in is, as we talk about this conversation about how do you upskill everybody, we've got this whole community of people in the UK, 17.3 million, or whatever the number is, it's large, who haven't got those essential digital skills. It's not the digitally excluded completely off, although they're in there as well, but it's a much bigger group of people that haven't got all 5 of those essential digital skills.
Where would those people be?
Well, exactly, they could be any, I mean, it's quite an interesting one because there's very little data about them, really. Everybody really understands the group that are the offline, but then you've got this other group of people, you know, half of them are under 60, but there's about 6% of them that are under 24. They tend to be in lower income jobs, they tend to be in the lower income sectors, slightly more likely to be a woman, but actually the data is very light. But the thing I'm intrigued about, and I suppose this is part of what we're trying to do under Future.Now, is to say, we've got this, in 2015 the government defined this framework, we've still got this huge number of people in the UK that are not up to that starting line. We profess to want to be a digital nation, we're, you know, infrastructure and all of that, but if people haven't got the skills to get there, so the bit I'm really intrigued about is how do we get, you know, how do we take the learning from industry that knows how to train people, team it with the motivation to actually make a massive step change in the UK. One of the pieces I was sharing earlier was only 1/3 of the workforce currently have had any digital skills training from their employer.
Okay.
So we spend a lot of time talking about the high-end skills, but actually we've got this really big risk of an increasing divide.
What I'm interested in this is that they go voluntarily to this learning space.
Yep.
And there's some peer pressure because it shows you what Liz or Julie or I have been looking at. So, you know, there's a bit of nudge theory going on. So there's that, isn't there?
Yes. So
and this is the self-service piece. It's quite interesting.
Yeah.
Yes. So we are doing our own bit. I think we are taking responsibility as a corporate, not just to, not leave the learning to academia, but actually create a consortium between academia, government and corporate. So it's a very small start, by the way, so I don't want to belabor the point or boil the ocean here, but a very small start. What we have tried to do is, we have looked at the local governments that we work with, and within the local government, what is their social value charter? And within the social value charter, we are looking at learning and education. And by the way, Infosys as an organization has a single purpose as education, because our Infosys Foundation, which is the CSR arm of Infosys, only focuses on education as the primary, and then there are a few sub-charters, but education is always the core for us. So that is at core of our ethos. So with this local government, within their social charter, we are looking at what is the apprentice uptake we can have. And this has nothing to do with apprentice levy, because we looked at that, and it is right now quite a stronger framework. So we are just doing our own bit without even looking at apprentice levy. We are looking at apprentice whom we can actually bring on board for 2 weeks and cross-skill them and pay them as a paid engagement. We are also looking at SME sector. So within my borough, who are what is the help they need for SME training, and we are actually committing that these are the number of SMEs we will actually help.
And this is in the foundation part?
No,
So
this is not yet into the foundation part.
Right, okay.
I am talking about my own business, my government business.
Right.
As a part of our social value,
Right, okay.
how we are actually engaging with them to actually up the digital skills. But obviously we are only doing with the councils that we are working with right now, and it is at school level in terms of events, telling them what it takes, bringing them to our offices, showing them some of the art of the possible, teaching them some of the digital skills at apprentice level, at working professional levels, and then we also are looking at the commitment of within the councils of interest with whom we do business, how we can actually take working professionals who are looking out, can be cross-skilled or upskilled and absorbed into our own business.
Brilliant.
So it's a very small start, I would say, but there is much more we can do. And one of my own conversation with the government very recently, 2 weeks ago, was if there is a way to marry the apprentice levy and the R&D tax credit, because both are there with the right intent, but probably the framework is right now not conducive enough.
There is much talk about the apprenticeship levy.
Yeah.
But let's move swiftly on, though, to the Digital Skills All-Party Parliamentary Group, Julie, because you're leading that. What are you doing in terms of fostering lifelong learning?
Well, I think if we go back to why the Digital Skills Group was set up, and all party groups are literally what they say, people from all different parties come together who've got an interest in this. And really the role of an all-party group is to bring together people from outside with skills and expertise and flag up to government what is needed and where the issues are in a very focused way. So what we've been doing so far is looking at what people see as the problems, and we're starting to move on to a programme of looking at what particular issues government need to be addressing. And the issue of lifelong learning and the pipeline stuff is coming up whatever we're talking about. So clearly that's going to be a focus of where our work is. But at the same time, we're very concerned about looking at some of the marginalised people in society who, you know, we absolutely will need moving forward if we have a tighter immigration system. You know, we're not a country of lots of spare people, so we need everybody to have the skills that they need to get involved in the workplace. So it's quite a broad range of things we're looking at.
And the data must suggest that, you know, we should have enough data to be able to say, you know, what happened to Sunderland is happening to Swindon, let's say, where Honda are pulling out, 3,000 people are left adrift. How can we inject them with droplets of micro-learning and reskill and retrain? But how can we do that in advance rather than afterwards? I suppose there's also timing and pace, isn't there, in the digital skills? There
is timing and pace. I mean, I don't think for a second our car factory is going to disappear the way the one in Swindon is. And actually, interestingly, Nissan actually have a college facility. They have a training arrangement with one of the local colleges to make sure that the people coming through have the right skills they need to go into the plant. And of course, some of the things that happen, the battery plant, which is no longer owned by Nissan, there are different skills that are needed for that. So actually, I think the car industry in Sunderland is quite innovative in the way that they look at skills and constantly retrain their workforce. The problem comes when you have a close down or a sudden impact into the economy. And that's where, you know, heading towards leaving the EU, which at the minute we're in this transition period where everything feels the same, but actually we all know it isn't the same. We don't know what's going to be beyond that. So really all employers and training organisations really need to be looking at making sure that people have the broadest range of skills to be able to adapt to whatever comes down the line. Because I do think that the world of work is going to be different, whichever route we take as a country and whichever route jobs become available. There are certain base level things that all people will need to be able to do, and I think that's not what is being addressed at the minute.
I'd agree with that, but I think the other thing is people are leading really busy lives, and actually, how do you motivate people to find the time to do that thing when actually what that thing is really hard to discover? I mean, we had a great presentation earlier from McKinsey. You know, what would you advise people to do if they wanted to protect themselves? You know, could be a cloud engineer. But actually, they're just, you know, if you're from a lower socioeconomic group and someone says you could be a cloud engineer, you might as well tell me I could be an angel or a unicorn. It doesn't mean anything to me. So how do you make that really practical? And I don't really understand why in the current environment, you know, for example, every single apprenticeship, to my mind, should have a digital seam in it. It should just be, you know, in the same way that what you were saying about school, you know, we live in a digital world, so some of this stuff, we just need to make it should be absolutely baked into everything that we do. And I just can't.
I totally agree with
I just don't understand that.
But, I mean, what is the role then of Parliament in fostering those digital skills? What actually do we need Parliament to do?
I think the all-party group is different than government. Government have a huge role, and of course what we have got after the election is stable government for a few years, which we haven't had in my 10 years in Parliament, actually, which is an opportunity. I might disagree with the government, but it is an opportunity in that we know we've got stability. And I think what they need to be looking at very carefully is what mechanisms they can put in place and what funding support they can put in place to allow employers to keep upskilling their staff and keep the retraining and the lifelong learning as part of, you know, everybody's week at work should include some element of constant training. And that's how you keep your workforce upskilled. So I don't think the government have got the mechanisms right at the moment. I think the apprenticeship levy has been a mixed success. I don't think it quite tapped into what needed to be done. And it's very difficult to track where it's actually working and where it's not, because it's all through HMRC. I think this new thing that's been developed, this national training thing,
the national retraining scheme.
Yes. You're talking about tens of people in my region. It's not really got off the ground.
the main things that it's focusing on are English and maths. And actually that's not where the issue is. The digital part is tiny in the retraining scheme. So that needs to be focused much more acutely to where the need is. Because actually schools have got very good at teaching English and maths, and most people come out of school with reasonable English and maths. It's the other elements that they're not good at, and that's where they need to focus. And I think the final thing I would say in terms of government, which is where the all-party group can sort of put pressure on government or try and influence government, is the key thing for any of these things to work is to make it simple and not too straitjacketed, because what suits one workplace or one area of work will not suit another. So if you have too many limits, like a hard and fast age profile that it affects, or if you've got a certain skill level, well, you might have a certain skill level, but it might not be in the area that you need to be upskilled. So just because you're a graduate in one area does not mean that you don't need to be upskilled in another area. So I think as little restriction within whatever support government can give would be the biggest thing in making this work.
Interesting. And if you were looking at, so those would be the near-term priorities. If you were looking forward to 2025, what would be the digital priorities for you?
Well, for me, I think it's looking at education from age 5.
Age 5.
And completely, and looking at teacher training so that we don't have this problem in the workforce down the line, addressing it.
How can teachers stay current when the kids arguably have got better kit at home? They sort of, you know,
they don't necessarily have better digital skills. They might be quicker on on working their way around an iPad or whatever, but they don't necessarily have proper skills. But at the moment, the reality is digital skills really don't play any part in teacher training. And if teachers are going to teach real digital skills to, you know, people from starting through from 5 all the way through, then every teacher needs to not only have those skills, be confident about them, and be constantly upgrading their own skills. They can't possibly teach things if they don't understand them and have the skills themselves.
Of course not. And so, Manish, retraining and upskilling 170,000 people, you know, how do you make sure your teachers stay ahead of that? Or is it all online learning? Or what? How do you inject those droplets of genius?
So one is the content, which is basically, one is a curated content, but it is also aggregator platform which get content, very relevant content from the likes of Udacity, the likes of Coursera and other platform providers. But more importantly, in terms of learning, we have actually taken away, so we used to host the largest corporate university in the world. So our corporate university can train 14,000 people at one go. And while the infrastructure is still there, if you look at Infosys Mysore, you could YouTube it. It's it's a grand campus. But we have actually done away with that, because it's all about micro learning, and it is in learning in smaller pods of people who are really focused on the similar end game as you. So the pods are never more than 4 or 5. And what we are leveraging a lot in terms of the newer ideas and newer learnings is our relationship with academia. So from 2014 onwards till now, I think before 2014 we were partners with about 16 or 17 academia all over the world, and today we are partners with more than 53 academia: Rhode Island School for Design, Stanford Business School, Harvard, closer home, Cambridge, Open University, and we are deep partners with Open University, going into APAC, quite a significant universities over there. And a lot of these we have like wealth of talent in academia who actually come and run these pods for machine learning or AI, and I think that's the mix that we are seeing giving us multiple results. But it's about how to make continuous learning, like the point that Liz made earlier, as a part of your lifestyle. And that was the one which actually pushed us to look at Netflix or Amazon Prime kind of a model, because the whole idea is to actually make learning during, when you commute, when you're on the train, or when you are on the airport, just download the content offline and do it offline, and very similar kind of a thing. The most, I'll share some statistics which actually shocked us, is out of the 240,000 people, until this afternoon we had 537 people on the platform, unique people on the platform. About 45,000 people have done end-to-end courses, so complete course end-to-end. More than 60,000 of the people are certified using those platforms. But the best thing was 170,000 people have actually, and we were thinking that people would actually spend about 10 minutes. Our initial aim was 10 to 15 minutes a day on this platform. When we looked at the stats, it actually shocked us. 170,000 people had averaged 44 minutes during a weekday and 53 minutes on a weekend. And weekend was never in the scheme of things. So it's probably, when you're actually waiting and while your son and daughter is gone for a football class, people are probably switching off.
I don't know where work-life balance has gone with all of this, but anyway. Yeah, no, but it is very impressive to see that micro-learning at scale, because, when you see the requirement for tech talent, we're turning to, systems integrators all the time and consultancies to make this stuff happen, because we don't have our own talent. So let me go somewhere else then. So what opportunities are there for new technologies to modify our approaches to learning and possibly remove barriers? I mean, we've heard about micro-learning, but what other practical things are there, Liz? What about Future.Now? What are you up to?
So I suppose for me it's not actually answering the question that you've just asked me, because I think a lot of it is actually not about going for new innovative things. It's actually just being really clear what the standard is we need to get everybody to, and enabling everybody to rise to that standard. And what I've been staggered by is, having started to shine a light on the Essential Digital Skills Framework, how poorly known about it is. And if people don't know about it, if business doesn't know about it, they're not going to train people to it. And we've now got organisations saying, no, I'm pledging, I'm going to start with my workforce. And actually, when you've got the likes of big retailers saying that suddenly does start to eat into that number. And I suppose what I'm really interested in is if you're able to pivot some of that high-end knowledge, but actually to tackle this basic thing, then what does that do for us as a nation? Because, the thing I really worry about is I worry about this completely divided society where we have the digital haves and we have the digital have-nots. And I think that, increasingly, I was telling a story earlier about my dad's hearing aid, which the woman in Specsavers has helped him program. It's changed his life, but my mum doesn't use a smartphone. What will happen as the technology changes? And it's that thing about what does all of this do as digital becomes the absolute golden thread that runs through our lives? And to Julie's point, we've got to make sure that from cradle to grave, we're upskilling everybody. And if that's what we've set at the standard, that has to be our first benchmark. But we're not even that. We don't seem to be tracking that hard and putting that much energy into it. I'd love to be having the same conversations that we're having about infrastructure investment, about getting everybody up to the basic level.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I mean, it's very hard to think about how accessing tech in general, I think 50% of all websites, all small companies don't even have a website, as an example. And also, there are very few websites that are accessible to people who have special needs in terms of sight and hearing and all sorts of things. And I think we are quite far behind in our digital at heart kind of program. But there's also this other thing in government, perhaps, where we've had a digital first policy which has morphed into digital only, and that risks leaving a lot of people behind as well. So when you're in your APPG meetings. I think that's also something to think about.
I think we also need to recognise that it's not just a training thing. This is actually a deeply personal thing. People have very visceral reactions to technology. You know, actually there's a whole thing about people's fear, their loss of control, their world changing around them in a way that they don't want to. You know, and that there is a whole piece around motivation, and that's something we're absolutely working on from a Future.Now perspective to understand those issues.
And I think that's very, very relevant for people who are actually very skilled and very successful in life and work, who feel very nervous and, you know, often are very frightened to say, well, actually, in this arena, my knowledge is very basic,
Yes.
because that's a hard thing to do.
Yes.
It's almost going back to some workplace learning initiatives that I was involved in 20 years ago, where you had, with basic skills with English, where you had people who were managing places and they literally could write their name and address and more. But they'd manage, I mean, they clearly had huge skills to work their way through.
Yeah.
But when some workplace training about basic English skills came in, and it was geared where people could do it in a non-threatening way, it was astonishing how many very successful people were almost illiterate. And I'm sure it'll be the same in digital skills, and it's getting it accessible and acceptable to be able to say, well, actually, I don't know how to do this. You know, I know how to do that, but I don't know how to do this.
And I think most of us think that everybody else is better at it than we are.
Yes, I think that's right. I mean, you only have to think about, remember, one of the televisions we bought didn't come with a remote control, and I'm thinking, how the hell are we going to turn the telly on? And all the programs, of course, you have to download it as an app. You can kill me now. How was I supposed to know that? But of course, the next generation don't you know, skip a beat on things.
If that had happened in my house, my kids would have turned around and go, call yourself a woman in tech.
Exactly.
It's like a weapon.
I know. My kids say, Mum, President of Tech UK, really?
Exactly.
Don't tweet that. But we are going to open the panel now up for questions from the audience. So we'd be delighted to bring you into our micro-learning, our droplets of information and our Netflix experiences that we've had up here. So please do wave your hands about. Yes, we've got a couple there, do. We've got our microphones winging their way.
Thank you very much. I just want to ask if you know examples of other countries where there are really good programs in place from government who are perhaps ahead of us, and whether you could say more about maybe there's other case studies around the world that we could be learning from.
Other countries around the world. Anyone? Manish, you look like you know stuff.
Oh, that's a good question.
So I can think of one while you're thinking. There's some really amazing work going on in Singapore looking at digital intelligence, and it's taking the idea of what are all the attributes that you actually need to thrive in a digital world. So it takes the soft and the hard and brings it all together, and you know, those skills in a really good way. And that's a really exciting piece of work. And what's also really good about it is they're not just keeping it in Singapore. They're really keen to discuss it with others. But actually, the thing that probably pretty much most countries are doing a lot better than us, if
Well,
the truth be known, on a lot of this area.
Shall we talk about China? Because, you know, age 4, maybe even younger, they are digital skills training all the way. They are getting AI training at that age, so at scale. So there are, you know, I think if we are taking it seriously as an opportunity to create competitive advantage, we would certainly invest a lot more, a lot younger, and at scale.
Estonia with their
absolutely.
Estonia project, where the whole society has gone digital. Everything from
They have embraced identity as a central component, which we have not.
Yeah, but it's a fascinating thing to go and see how they've not just made it absolutely acceptable. Nobody questions that it's the way to do things, and you know, from getting your pass to get on a bus, or
your doctors, every bit of life is now sort of online.
And there is some stats which says the countries that adopt digital and embrace it faster, they are economically significantly more successful. So there is interesting experiment in Estonia. But I agree, they have though put personal identity as at the heart of that strategy. You cannot do it unless you've got your identity on a central database.
Yeah.
And we haven't done that here. So,
No, I would say Nordics,
Nordics, yeah.
Nordics in a big way, be it the way they do the payments, the entire economy is cashless. So literally every month when I'm traveling there, I have not taken any kroners or euros in a long time now, because I don't need even the regular shop would actually do it for you. But more importantly, I think some of the things that are working well in those areas are. I came across this wonderful example in Helsinki, and my colleague told me this. So we were just right next to our office. We were just walking by, and I saw this young people, probably in the secondary school or slightly more, and they're all gathered around in small classes and trying to work out something. And I asked my colleague, what's going on? So what he said is they were looking at a model where after school, after 3 p.m., they can actually create a community-like thing wherein the youngsters or the secondary school children could actually get accustomed to new skills. And these are, by the way, these are not just digital skills, these are many other skills that they are onto. It all depends upon what they are keen on. And this is run free of cost by the government across Finland. And he said that's giving a very big push to slush. So Finland economy, if you would know, is very much dependent on, very similar to us, on small and medium businesses. These businesses are basically a lot of startup. They host the biggest startup festival in the world, which is called a Slush, and a lot of these kids are really inspired by Slush, and they want to have create something of their own. And I thought the idea is absolutely brilliant.
What's really lovely about that as well is also the fact that they're giving it to everybody and free, because that's the thing that makes a really big difference from a social mobility perspective. That actually everybody be able to consume and enjoy.
It's very motivating, and when it comes of the people as well. Another water-based word, though, slush. I'm going to call you out on that one. But it is. Why go and get a job when you can create one? And that's the beauty of entrepreneurship as well. We had another question, yes, just behind.
Thank you. You mentioned near the end about the perception of lack of skills and training, but earlier on you also talked about digital skills maybe only having a life of 18 months. So how do you get round the obstacle of people saying, I don't want to be involved in a digital economy or a digital environment because it forces me to look at a future where I'm constantly having to put an effort to reskill. And actually, right now, I'm happy with my life. I'll opt out of the digital economy because I don't want this constant life pressure on top of all the other things I have to do.
Can I?
Please.
So I think digital is here and now, and yes, there are ways and means to work around that. Not saying that at all, but just if I just abstract out your question onto a much higher level, right? What was happening around the world, right? The employability, right, and learnability were first you learn at the university and then you get employed, right? And there used to be a gap. And, the employability used to always follow learnability. We are moving into the world where employability and learnability are together. So digital is not a threat for you. What is a threat is your ability to learn, unlearn, relearn, and be on the continuous learning cycle. Because no matter whether you are part of the digital ecosystem today, and I don't know what it gets called tomorrow, the new fancy word, but the whole point is, if at the end of the day you have learnability within you and you're able to improvise your outcome, on the job that you are doing, I think you can survive in any economy.
It's a really interesting question, isn't it? Because you can't uninvent technology either. So if you want to live on the fringes of it, that I think that's a specific, very specific choice. And I'm wondering how possible that's going to be in a future world. What I do see though is that we will need very human skills to navigate a digital world. So we will have our technology skills in one corner of our kit bag, but we're going to have quite a lot of human behavioural skills like empathy, like critical thinking, which are, really going to become much, much more important, or as important, I should say, as we go to a much more automated world. And I just think that we must not lose sight of the soft skills as well as we walk forward into our digital journey. I don't know if we've answered your question. I'm not sure there's a good answer to that question about going off-grid. I'm sure it's possible. I did actually hear a Radio 4 programme on Saturday about someone who'd gone off-grid, or never been on the grid actually, but he lived in a forest.
It's that amazing programme, isn't there? The people that are trying to win the wilderness at the moment out in Alaska.
Yeah.
They're 100 miles from the nearest place, but they've still got the internet,
And I'm sure Amish community will be doing the same.
Well, it's interesting which Maslow's triangle you decide to work with, because in the bottom of mine it's got Wi-Fi as the layer below, food and shelter, and then underneath that I'm fighting people for the plug in Starbucks, so I need battery power underneath it as well. I agree, sometimes I'd really like to get off that carousel. Yeah. It doesn't happen much, but it's a great question, and quite, I suppose what we're talking about is how do we get everyone on the grid, which is quite interesting, isn't it?
Absolutely. I believe that, whenever I think about this, the world that we are moving in, obviously as a human, there are, we have the fear of unknown, and there is a lot of, this entire disruption is creating unknown in front of us. But at the same point, what really excites me is the possibility that finally, humans would actually have the real opportunity to actually come out of routine, mundane, the same operational task again and again, and actually, step back from all that and actually use the potential, that every human being is blessed with, to actually recreate something new. So that is something, the world I look forward to.
Yeah, I love that, but I'm also not sure I believe that. if I can be really honest, I do worry about a world where actually we need to make sure we are bringing people with us so that there are jobs. Everybody needs jobs. Everybody needs to be able to make a living. And an efficient world is not necessarily the best world for everybody. But one of the things I've been really inspired by, at BT we run a programme for young 18 to 24-year-olds who are not in employment, education and training. And we've always had a relatively traditional approach to what we take them through. It's a 2-week programme, very much around employability skills and work experience. But last year we did a major refresh of that, and we've added into that a 3-day part that is all about digital. And they basically go through a hackathon to create their own business. And it's been amazing watching the young people's minds change around how they might get employment and whether it is about employment. And actually, can I create something and make money from it myself? and some of the ingenuity that has come in the room from some young people from pretty challenging backgrounds and, you know, hard situations. I mean, there was one team in London that created an app called Tindogs, which was Tinder for dog breeders. But, I mean, seriously, I mean, that is genius.
Right?
If you're in that, I mean, Tower Hamlets, no, but not joking aside, Tower Hamlets enterprise team are now giving that team
You
extra
heard it here
support.
first.
But what I'm saying is, it's that thing about getting people to think differently about where the jobs might be or how they might earn money. And actually, your thing about small and medium enterprises, if we can get more of that entrepreneurial nature through digital, that could be a really positive thing, but we need to get everybody up to that place.
But it's also about just giving people the confidence to you know, some of the things that they know about or have, that actually there's opportunities in it, which often people who come from more deprived backgrounds don't have people around them who'll say, well, actually, have you thought of doing this?
Yeah.
That's about confidence, really, isn't it? So
I think it is that, and that the genius in the Tindogs app, I just wanted to say it, is that someone spotted the friction in the market. And it's a bit like, remember, well, I don't know if anyone came on the tube here today, but remember the days when we used to have to buy a ticket for the tube, right? Not so long ago, I'm going to say. And now, tap and go technology, payless, you know, cardless, not payless, cardless. You know, the genius is the person that said, we don't need a new ticket machine or faster ticket machines. We don't need queue management. We need to walk through the barriers without breaking a stride. And that is that's not technology, by the way. That's just critical thinking, which I love. And the same is true of, I don't know if anyone's been in a restaurant recently where you're trying to get the waiter's attention when you've finished. You go, I really want to go, I want to pay, I've got to go, lunch break's over. And you can't get their attention because they've moved on to the new customers. So there is an opportunity to potentially tap and go in a restaurant, surely. You know, but it's quite interesting that the genius is in spotting the Tindogs opportunity. And I think that's the piece that I love about tech, that it's not always the tech that's the magic. It's the humanity that creates that.
You've got to put the two together, haven't you? It's that thing about someone's got to have given you the bit of information that went, I can add that bit that I know, this bit of technical stuff, and now I can do.
But now I'm thinking tin ponies, or, you know, we could do all sorts of things with matching.
No longer president of Tech UK, imagine what you're going to do.
But you could do it with roles and skills, and bringing us back elegantly to the panel. Roles and skills. We need to match, you know, once we've trained everybody, we also need to make sure that we've got people matched up to roles across the country. Yes, we have another question. Hope is about dogs.
It's not about dogs, I'm sorry, but it does follow on from what you were just saying. And one of my favorite quotes from a technology-based TV show, which that technology, it's not the thing, it's the thing that gets you to the thing. And I think perhaps the focus on digital skills as the primary focus of our efforts, and even this sort of deficit of you're not reaching a certain standard, can be very off-putting to a lot of people. When people see how technology is a tool that can support what they want to do, they will learn it and they use it. And so my question to the panel is, how do we flip that? How do we put more emphasis on helping people to understand technology as a tool to help them reach their ambitions and do the things they care about, rather than saying there's a deficit in you because you lack certain digital skills?
This is about the why, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I've just spent an hour or half an hour talking about that just now. I mean, we're doing some work from a Future.Now perspective on exactly that motivation point. You know, we need to actually tap into this whole thing differently. It's, you know, at the moment, it's a really binary thing. You've either got it or you haven't got it. It needs to be about small incremental steps. It needs to be about the things that matter to you. And I think there's a whole change of narrative that's really needed here. So, I mean, I'm absolutely with you. And as I say, we're doing some work to really understand that. And also what we can learn from other
really amazing behaviour change campaigns that are out there. There's been some phenomenal work done. And what, let's start from base principles. Let's actually just learn from others and then really apply it to the problem that we've got here.
Even as a technology firm, right? The misgivings of a technology firm has been, we were too engineering oriented, and we were too technology centric and very narrow-minded focus. And I'm sure whoever knows tech knows all the troubles happens when the go live happens, right? Because business thinks, oh, this is not exactly what we wanted, but the technology has provided for it because they interpreted it that way. And while technology is an enabler, technology is not the end goal. Technology is only an enabler to reach your end goal. And it is very important to actually have that clarity at the start, no matter what you do. Even from a technology organization, as a technology organization, since last 3 or 4 years, our half of the intake is non-STEM. Because unless and until you have a liberal arts student, you have somebody who is from the humanities background, nobody is going to challenge a tech guru who says, okay, I did the analytics and this is the data. Yeah, but in the first place, you're not supposed to see that data. It is against ethics. Who would actually challenge that? And those are those disciplines that actually are as relevant as the technology itself to deliver to the end goal. So technology is an enabler.
In a practical sense, I'm just thinking of the biggest social landlord in Sunderland, Gen 2. They had a programme about 18 months ago of going and visiting all of their tenants to look at their energy suppliers, because as we all know here, if you do your energy supply online, it's cheaper. And I've forgotten what the transfer rate was, but it was enormous. So they'd go and visit people, they didn't know how to do it, they sat there with the iPads, they have drop-in places where they can go along if they don't have the equipment to do it. And virtually all of their tenants are now doing their energy supply online and getting cheaper energy. So that's about, they didn't even know it existed in the main, but that was about going out and saying, well, this is just something practical, sit and set up their online accounts, and they save money. So they're obviously then very keen to keep doing that and look at that in different areas of their life. So that's a very practical example of getting you to something that actually is very beneficial through technology, in a very practical thing that wouldn't have happened without the company thinking, actually we're going to invest some people time in getting these people, getting it set up, getting it sorted, and now it just runs quite straightforwardly. So it's a very practical example, I think, of people using technology in day-to-day lives where they wouldn't have thought about it, they wouldn't have known where or how to access it.
But it's a really good question, because we are, in the technology world, we love to fiddle about and create technology for technology's sake, and there's a lot of that around. But that's not just a tech issue, actually. There's a lot of that in a lot of different walks of life.
I want to link back, following the title about Mind the Skills Gap, to the talk we had this morning, and the big issue we've got with gender, getting females wanting to be influential in changing tech and being involved in this. And although from schools initiatives we see it in the primary schools, we can get girls really interested, we seem to lose a lot of interest once we get into the early teens. And we really do need to change this, and it's something we've been working at for over 30 years. 30 years ago I went on a Women's to Science and Engineering course. It made me want to be a software engineer, but how do we change the mindset? How do we make a difference? Because I think that's one of the things that will help us.
That's a much bigger question than just technology.
It is a big question, but you know what? In the early teens, the girls stop wanting to go to classes which are STEM or related, and there was a massive study done at the Girl Guiding Association, which I support. There are 500,000 girl guides in this country. And what they said was that going into a class where the majority did not look like them made them not want to do that subject. And also a very, very high percentage, we may not want to hear this, but there are some teachers who will say the words, "This might not be the class for you," meaning that this is for boys, or overtly saying this is really, you know, not a girl's thing. And so we have to be extremely careful because, and sometimes, you know, language is very small part. Sometimes it's body language that gives those messages. And I think we have to worry about those tiny interventions that are very, very subtle, but are incredibly impactful in terms of pushing girls in or out of tech. And so equally, you can have tiny interventions, I believe, which push them in the direction of tech opportunities. And it doesn't necessarily have to happen when they're tiny, although that would be great. You know, at the Girl Guiding Association, as an example, we've got 12 new STEM badges, and they start with stay safe online, what does consent look like online, and they go up to AI and robotics. And these are very small Wednesday evening or Tuesday evening interventions that happen every week at Girl Guiding, and they can win their badge. I believe if they can make a paper lantern, they can learn how to stay safe. So, you know, there are things that we have to do at school, and things that we also need to do to influence the influencers, and that's both parents and teachers. It's not just the teachers that will say that's a boys' thing. It's also the parents, and it goes back to, you know, the T-shirts that I was talking about earlier, blue for genius, yellow for make the world a prettier place. It's subtle, but it's always there, I think. What does the panel think?
I think it's also a language thing. I mean, what is an engineer? You know, if someone turns around to you and say, "Do you want to be a problem solver that's going to make a difference and sort out things?" You could go, "Yeah, I want to do that." Engineer. Be an engineer.
Yeah, you don't have to like engines. You don't have to be a boy. You don't have to have muscles.
Do you know, it's that whole thing, and I think there's some really, I mean, it's subtle, isn't it?
Yeah.
But actually, it's quite pervasive as well.
In engineering, if you ask a lot of parents, they think it's a very dirty, old-fashioned, you know, thing to do. Where actually, modern engineering is not that at all.
No, nothing like that.
So I mean, a few years ago as well, we did a piece of research at BT around what parents thought technology careers were. And they honestly thought they were call centre jobs.
Really?
Yeah, there was a whole thing about, I don't really want my kids to work in a call centre. It's quite an interesting thing about that.
Yeah, this is all changing with the new world. So, I mean, about a decade ago, we had a very poor male to female ratio. And it was a conscious attempt by our founding father that we need to have the right mix. Because it's not just about getting it right, but it is also the skills, you know, the complementary skills that a man and a woman get together, or you know, that is really important in the age we live in. And that basically started a whole lot of you know, initiatives and so on and so forth. Today we are proud that, you know, 46% of our workforce are women. And it has taken a very long, you know, 10-year long journey. But what has really helped is, like I was saying before, in the digital era, it's not just about the technology. It's also about having the right skills, the design skills and humanities, and you know, taking it from liberal arts. We acquired a British firm about 2 years ago. Locally in London, and which has now grown 3 times, and all that we are actually hiring in there. While it's a digital firm, it's a digital media agency. So all that we are hiring in there are the non-tech, but they are very creative people. They're from liberal arts. different design, and the ratio is very high girls to very high
I'm not surprised.
boys. So that is really helping getting the ratios right in the larger scheme of things.
Well, and diverse teams make better business decisions.
Absolutely.
87% of the time.
You can see it on the panel.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a question at the back here. Have we got another microphone? Yes.
So I just wanted to flag that the Royal Academy of Engineering and Engineering UK have been working on this image problem of engineers and people thinking that it's a dirty, oily profession. They've developed a resource called This is Engineering, and if you Google it, you get there very quickly. It's aimed at 15 to 18-year-olds. Of the people that engage with it, if you survey them before they look at it, about 39% say, yeah, I think I might consider engineering as a career. After they've been and looked at the videos, which are all about the modern image of engineering, 75% say that they would consider engineering as a career. So it's a fabulous resource. The videos are really current. You can embed them in any talk that you give to schools. And I think that's really, really good resource, really helpful. The other thing I would just say around tech is I have 2 girls who both are doing science subjects, so they do chemistry, biology, maths, physics. They wouldn't do computer science. I think girls are quite savvy, and they looked at the curriculum for computer science and they said that's too much effort. I could do a different GCSE, which would be easier, and I can get a better grade. Why would I do computer science? So I think there's also something about the curriculum content of the subjects that we've got to get right so that girls don't do that analysis. If they're smart, they just look at effort versus reward and say, I don't need that. And I think that's a real challenge.
I don't really understand why I mean, I do understand why computer science is a separate subject, but I also think it should just be a theme that runs through everything you do. Why wouldn't you have computing part of your history, computing part of your geography? I mean, I remember, like, my son had really slow writing speed for his exams, and spending ages with him to get his writing speed up, and then he suddenly went to work and he went, I don't use a pen anymore. And I was like, no, it's a complete waste of time. And it's that thing about, if it's a theme, it should be a theme through our education system in the way that you've described, and that should be using the tools as well as creating with the tools.
But I also think, although the thing you talked about for 15 to 18-year-olds sounds fantastic, I think we need it earlier than that, because so many young people put off their career opportunities by picking the wrong options. And so many schools in sciences just do dual award science, which in itself limits what they can do moving down the line. So you might have young people who are perfectly able to do single sciences and computer science, but they're not on offer, or they don't opt to take them. So I really feel very strongly that this needs to be at the back end of primary school, where that type of programme is coming through. Because when I go into schools, I always talk about what people want to do when they leave school. And boys, it's always want to be a professional footballer, and because they want to earn lots of money, that's the motivation. Girls are a little bit more nuanced about what they want to do, but they also want to be famous. That's kind of the thing of the minute. When you get underneath and you talk about what opportunities there are, there's very little in schools, in my experience, of knowing what jobs are actually out there, what they need to be choosing and, focusing on for the jobs that are really out there. And, whether that's careers guidance has gone wrong somewhere, but something isn't connecting between what is happening. And this, I feel as if I'm putting down schools, and I'm not, because schools are fantastic places in the main, but there is a disjoint between what young people are learning and what the world of work and the outside world is about. And somehow we've got to get that put right.
My daughter's school, I was recently at daughter's school, and the head teacher made a very profound statement. She said, when I look at these kids, I always wonder what jobs they are going to do when they grow up, because those jobs are not existing today.
Yes. Yes,
It is
well,
pretty profound.
it is profound. We have to skill them up for jobs that don't
Yeah.
yet exist. It's very, very tricky. So we've taken you on a journey through digital skills. I'm not sure we've given you pertinent answers, although we have found tin dogs, which I think is the gift that keeps on giving. And micro-learning, which is, those droplets of micro-interventions are super interesting that you can get close to 240,000 people trained voluntarily is quite extraordinary. And we rely on what the APPG is going to be doing in terms of influencing digital skills in this country as we move forward. So the last thing I would say on signposting, though, and careers advice and guidance is that at Tech UK we have been working with Deloitte to put together a digital skills platform which does exactly that, which signposts and matches skills to roles. So quite excited about finding a way to fill that gap, which is, there's a lot of good stuff going on and people need to find it. So, this is why we bring industry, academia and government together so that we can find the best of all opportunities for everybody, so that we can create that digital nation of significance and we can create a digital nation of entrepreneurs who create their jobs versus going to get one, and they create amazing apps that we've just heard of. Tin dogs, tin